Hi ladies and gentlemen, how you doing? It's Dave Dobbs here. It's the 16th of September 2019. I don't even know if I need to put these glasses on because I don't know if I even need to look at the screen. Maybe I can just put that down for a shake and just talk about the volcanic activity that occurred on Friday the 13th.
13th of September 2019. It is Friday here in the States. Yes, the proverbial Friday the 13th. Hope you're doing well. We are here to talk about seismic events, and we're using the USGS and EMSC, the European agency. Give us a good idea of what's going on, and we're looking at 48 hours worth of earthquakes approximately on the screen here now. Also, for new viewers, we need to go see the erupting volcanoes to get an idea of where the stress is, if there's an increase, a decrease in eruptions. It plays into the earthquake activity. So Nevada State, Chilean, let's jump across and go all the way over here. So we have seven on one side, basically. And here we have Popocatépetl in Mexico. That's volcano number 1. Here we have Fuego, and we have Santa Guido, both erupting in the last 2 days. That's 2 and 3. We get down here, and we have Reventador. That's number 4. We get down here even further, and volcano number 5 is Sabancaya. Further down to the south, we have Ubinas, Copihu, and Nevados de Chilean. That's really 6, 7, and 8. So in the last 48 hours, we have an increase in the number of volcanoes erupting. That's a definite increase from where we were last week, which was like 2 on one side and 2 on the other, or 3 on one side and 3 on the other. When I say one side and the other, I mean East Pacific and West Pacific. So we jumped from, a few volcanoes on each side erupting to several volcanoes erupting on each side. The only good news I have for you is that they're small eruptions. But to see a volcano increase means that the pressure is increased on all these different magma chambers, causing eruptions at the most active and weakest points.
And of course, I just went off to Extinction Rebellion to... For me, was my own purpose there was because of my kind of analysis of the whole carbon story and where I'm going with it, and the orbital mechanics that I bring into what many are calling, grand solar minimum. There's kind of like this dynamo effect that Valentina Zarkova would call the dynamo effect. This kind of 350 to 400 year kind of like 350 kind of cycle of the sun. And of course, this is where Jeremy Corbyn's brother, Piers Corbyn, is going. He's big in the GSM movement. And of course, this completely stands in the face of the whole carbon dioxide movement. This is the massive migration of where the biggest part of the migration is going from the carbon story and global warming, which morphed into climate change. And now the camp is split between kind of like Piers Corbyn's kind of side of it, which is the grand solar minimum, the observation of sunspots. And of course, we were talking all about this much more in 2012, and then kind of after 2012 and all the kind of Mayan prophecy sort of stuff. Even though we saw Fukushima go bang in 2011, we had all the major sightings of Planet X. We knew it had arrived in the central hub of our solar system, causing absolute chaos. All the 2012ers were still completely laughed at. The level of destruction caused by that massive tsunami. 3 nuclear power stations going at the time, massive carbon dioxide release into the waters around there. You can see it all bubbling up after the earthquake, massive whirlpools of carbon dioxide coming up through the ground. And if we're equating that we need to build nuclear power stations to offset our carbon output, when we can see that nuclear power stations, not just Fukushima, remember that, like I tried to show so many times before, when Carlos Ferrada back in 1939 had made his prediction that there would be a massive earthquake, and on the 20th of, he said it would be on the 24th of January. And I know I go through this data, but it's so important we keep it together at this time, because I've just put my total neck on the line, as I have done so many times with chartering this object is making predictions based on all the previous sightings and all the previous data. No airy-fairy. I didn't say Friday the 13th because it's an auspicious day. I said it because it was one day before the new moon on the 14th, and because of that alignment, there would absolutely be a massive, very noticeable increase in volcanic activity, just like there was 3 days before the previous new moon on the 1st of September, and then 3 days after when Chevelus and Etna, and the massive activity that just occurred on the 13th. Dutch Synth, the reason I'm going to him is because he has been running a channel observing earthquakes and volcanoes for a very long time. His research is phenomenal. Now he can see and he can charter the way energy can move around the planet, but he's not suggesting where it's coming. He's suggesting that definitely fracking is exacerbating that. But he's not. I don't see him so much as necessarily seeing where the energy is coming from. He's looking at how energy in seismology moves around a craton, around a plate, around a tectonic plate, and around cratons, which are parts of, big parts of tectonic plates. If we're dividing our whole resolve to come together to come up with a true solution of what we want, which is ultimately clean, abundant energy to run the systems that we run, and if we go down this corridor of carbon zero, when we can see the type of activity, I put my neck on the line to go along to Extinction Rebellion and say, look guys, we are going to see a massive increase in volcanoes on that day. And their mission, of course, was, their message at Extinction Rebellion, what they were gathering in terms of the People's Assembly, which is the third thing they want to get together. The first thing is truth, the second thing is zero carbon, as I'm understanding it, and the third thing is the People's Assembly. And they wanted to know how they could enact a People's Assembly, and I went along and I said, well, maybe not dividing yourself. So, I went along to the People's Assembly and I put my opinion forward, and I saw how my opinion came and landed and went, and we formed a group, and then that group formulated all its ideas into, boiled those down a little bit more and cleaned that up a little bit, and then we had a representative of the group. We chose a representative of each group that went and put that information, presented that information, and it all went finally up onto a board. And my idea was, my kind of like, how could you get the government to implement that, is you need to get the people's support, and the way you're going to get the people's support is by not dividing them on this issue. Can we not boil, if we're calling for carbon dioxide, carbon zero, when we can see that nuclear power stations, the backbone of their support is because they're reducing supposedly carbon dioxide by producing massive amounts of energy without the necessary carbon dioxide. And we can see that nuclear power stations have gone have erupted on, like I say, not just on the day of Fukushima, but also because of Carlos Ferrada's prediction on the 24th of January 1939, the year the Second World War began, and where a massive earthquake happened in Chile, right where he said it would at the time. It was 4 days out, and it came on the full moon, not 4 days after the full moon. And this is why we've learnt so much about the full moon. It's how it amplifies the effect of other astral bodies near us. And I'm of a mind that the twin tail object that I've been chartering is very close to us. We're getting very close to it at the moment, and its tail. And so we're going to see the biggest effects around about the 22nd of October, where last year it was the 23rd of September. So I knew it was only going to be a marginal increase, but you can imagine that we're getting to that point now where we are risking nuclear power stations going off. Now, Carlos Ferrada said that Planet X would return in 1999, and we saw Comet Hale-Bopp in 1997-98. And it's only because of computers that I could understand from the movements I charted from this twin tail object, and charting what it's orbiting and the direction that we're trying to understand this Planet X that it's orbiting is moving, and all these other elements that we're piecing together bit by bit, year by year, more and more data, constantly updating it. it was through a computer system that we can bring that kind of like effect into almost like a coil, a spiral. And when we open it up, we realize, as I keep going through, is these three aspects, and that central aspect is that point when Kilauea, Krakatoa, big earthquakes in sort of like America, and of course Chernobyl erupts on the 26th of April on the same day as a massive earthquake occurred on a fault line that it was just above. Now I've just put my reputation on the line to show you if we don't pursue a clear pathway and express clearly what we want to achieve now, we're not going to get there. We can't be pulled off down these corridors, which is just feeding other industries. Horrible industries like the nuclear industry. We're being used as controlled opposition, even though we might be acting with the very best intentions. Our arguments are being thwarted by bullshit science that is turning climatology into a religion. We're ending up with born-again climatologists, literally. And they run with this carbon story and they become evangelists with it. Not looking at all the earthquakes, not willing to open themselves to it, rigid on this story that has just been filled with a lot of bullshit. And we're learning to change it. You know, when the great global warming swindle came out in about 2011, 2012, I remember watching that and just thinking, how could you say that? I didn't care that it was the founding members, some of the founding members of Greenpeace and some of the people, the most upfront people in the original creation of the carbon story, that were coming forward and saying, guys, we're all bullshit. It was all Thatcher driven nonsense to drive the nuclear industry when they were shutting down all the coal. It wasn't that they were buying it overseas, that they were going to go full scale into nuclear. And this was this sort of like a, you know, and that's to operate a much more bigger stake in the banking centres, and as we've always done, you know, and we've got to upgrade this story, and this. It's not like we're just looking at the ideas of clean energy with a brand new window. We've been doing this for a long time. You know, Tesla was more than 100 years ago performing stuff that we know, we can see they were doing. We can understand this concept that in any part of the air right now, because of the Schumann resonance that's going around us all the time, we're on a planet that's spinning at electromagnetic energy everywhere. It's like we are immersed in very high amperage energy all the time, but very, very low voltage. And that energy is kind of like this electromagnetic energy is what Tesla was tapping into. I tell you, when a name that's been spoken about more and more and more, and it's Randy Mills. I don't know if you've heard of him. You know, I've heard of the kind of like the brilliant light power sort of ideas, but his history, his timeline, is a fantastic timeline to look at someone who's been really pioneering his whole story about how he patented his system, where he was basically, basically just to create. Imagine making a sun in a coffee cup. You know, the electrodes, just any electrodes you use, just melt, and so they've devised this system using, even because though silver melts at a very low temperature, it boils at an unfeasibly high temperature, higher than any other metal, as I'm understanding. So they've been using molten silver to create the electrolysis, or to create the conductors for the arc, to get the arc going. And then what they're doing is they're passing water through it, and the hydrogen, as I'm understanding, is collapsing down into what they're calling a hydrino. A hydrino, which they're saying is what is commonly understood to be dark matter. Very small particles travelling extremely high speed, and but they're the smallest you can get, because they're the smallest atom, a hydrogen that's had all of its, if you like, sunlight fused, taken out of it, so it collapses down into this compact hydrogen atom they call a hydrino. And it can be, I mean, I don't know if it can be reinflated, I don't know, but considering it's one of the most abundant kind of like atoms in our solar system, and it's not creating waste, as I'm understanding it. It's creating an atom that is readily available in all around us. It's an atom that hasn't got any energy at all. Truly, I do not know. But just shouting out carbon zero when I'm saying, guys, we need to upgrade this story now, or we're just going to be used as controlled opposition and not push anything forward with this argument. We're not going to achieve anything with this argument. But we can see that because of what happened when Chevaluche went off 3 days before the new moon, and the full moon that's just gone, and the volcanoes, and the massive increase in volcanoes on that day, including Etna, just spewed on that day. Same with a lot of other volcanoes became more active on that day. An enormous amount of very kind of 5.5 kind of like earthquakes all around the globe that same day. Unusually high activity. Specifically on that day, on the day I put my neck on the line there, I put my reputation on the line to say that in advance, because I absolutely know that will happen, and I know that when the next new moon happens, which I guess if the full moon is on the 14th, it's going to be about the 20. It's going to be 29th, 28th, isn't it? The next new moon. You can imagine we're much closer to it. So it's going to be about day and a half before, at the most, the day before the next new moon. Serious increase in volcanoes and earthquakes. A serious increase. Then the full moon is going to be about the same, and then the next alignment, the next new moon. Serious volcanic and seismic activity, without any doubt, because of what we've seen June, July, when we had the Brexit vote. They always have big votes. Then we have, July, August. Remember when I went out to, when I went out to America, and I did went to the WSO conference on Planet X, and I went out there. At the time, Steve flew me out for the time that we knew that my predictive flyby, and of course it flew by on the 17th of August. We had the big ESO, the European Southern Observatory, reporting massive gravitational anomalies on the same day, and we see it on both sides of the Atlantic, in Brazil and in Portugal, on the same day. And then we sort of like, and then 2016 we'd seen it also after we'd had the sort of like we had the small sighting in June. Then we had the big storms on June the 23rd. We had the sighting on June the 23rd, the day of the vote. Then we had Matt Rogers' famous shot on the 15th of August 2016. Well, we're seeing it just coming from that point, and it's been getting later and later coming across. But for us, we're actually getting closer and closer and closer to it. So it's actually dropping back, but we're actually, because its cycle is 1/13 slower, full rotation, than Earth's orbit around the Sun. And so we get this one calendar month dropping back each year. And you remember September, just before the big September sort of like tsunami, which happened on the full moon on September the 23rd last year, 2018, and we had the tsunami in Indonesia. And of course, then after that, on the next full moon, not the next full moon, but closer to the December time, we had the next tsunami. And do you remember the whole of Krakatoa blows the top off, spews more carbon dioxide? And what bubbled off, what went off on the 13th what just suddenly popped into life again on the 13th, Friday the 13th, as well as all the other volcanoes that spewed on that day in that massive spike. But I absolutely guaranteed that you would see Krakatoa popped into life again. I'm not trying to be a doomer and gloomer. This is just what's happening. We're throwing a story at this for whatever reason we're throwing it. Blinding ourselves what is absolutely happening. You know, and then we come obviously into this December point after that, you know, where we come to the big crossing point. Is that going to happen? Oh, my mind is, because of the big sighting we saw where Alex Lujan put up around, like, I can't remember the exact date now, but it was kind of early July, I think. Late August, early July, but we got a real idea of which way it was moving at that point of the arc over what we would call our ecliptic, not so ecliptic. Because, like I say, when you look at this whole system, as I often keep going, it's so important to try and get to grips with this, seeing our solar system not on the flat ecliptic plane, this Copernicus model that we've been, this 400-year dated model that stopped Carlos Ferrada being able to see the big earthquakes and that would happen in 1986. We saw the big earthquakes in America. We saw, like I say, Krakatoa and Kilauea going off, as well as Chernobyl. But it wasn't until you can expand that in 3D and see how a binary system would orbit. And of course, now we're left with the question, because of the last sighting that Alex Lujan put up again on the 1st of September, and because of the arc of the tail, we're left with this odd analogy. And it leaves us with this question. Has the planet X system arrived on our doorstep? Or is this latest shot showing us that the dwarf planet, the black star, what David Bowie, it's a black star, this black star that Terrell Blackstar, I think it's, Terrell, he's got, I never understand his theories at all, but he is solid with it, he has a science, and apparently some people get their heads around it, so I would never criticise it. I always just try and get my head around it. I can't always get my head around it, but nonetheless, he is, he's handling his side of how he perceives things, but whether you see it as a black star, a dwarf planet, a black hole, there is something there. Clearly, the sightings have just been too fantastic, and all we do is hide behind our beliefs. Like all these volcanoes are a religion. Fukushima doesn't happen if we don't talk about it. It's not convenient for our argument. Chernobyl, we'll just try and pretend. I don't know if you've seen the big series Chernobyl, and it just starts with sort of like, and it starts with the guy sort of like hanging himself, whistleblower kind of like scenario, human guilt, human caused problem from the onset, and then we just see this kind of series of just this massive blame game, series of just blame after blame after blame because of human error incorporated in every aspect of his message, blinding you from the one thing you're not meant to notice. The earthquake that was on the same day. It's a complicated message, guys. It's such a big thing. My message runs so much bigger because you suddenly get your head around it, and then as soon as you get your head around it, suddenly you know all the answers again. And it's a bigger story. It's a very big story. This thing has come by many, 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 many times. It's a regular player. It's a regular occurrence. It comes by every 189 years, thereabouts. Carrington event was caused by this. Shakespeare's Tempest, inspired no doubt by the great tempest that destroyed the entire Armada in one fell swoop, 1588, August 1588, caused by this. Enemies driven to go onto the wheels of their own gods. Driven into destruction. Through war, driving them into war. Notice Iran just left a message, a very clear message. Just saw it in the papers today, saw it on I think it was the Financial Times, but Iran's put a clear message out. It's ready for full-scale war if anyone even dares try. And of course, Israel is gagging to start war. But they want someone else to pick up the guns. It's whoever goes into war loses. Notice how British baited the Spanish into going to war at the worst possible time. Annihilated. And so there's a big contingency that is just attempting to say, if we can't have Earth, no one can have Earth. And also, for England, England was once with Elizabeth, was on the other side of the equation and wouldn't go to war at this time because of Elizabeth, guided by John Dee, who saw all of this. Quite which way it was working, but maybe Britain's playing the same game here, trying to drive all its enemies into attacking at this time. But Britain made a terrible mistake being dragged into the war with NATO in 2011. Remember, we had Fukushima, had a big flyby, and massive flyby. And we're not dropping aid on Japan, we're dropping bombs on Libya. David Cameron and NATO. We're on the wrong side of the equation here, guys. If we go into war at this time, of course, if we go west rather, if we leave Europe, this is why that's why I wrote Laughing Gas and everything else of that. People can't see the relationship between Europe and Brexit and Planet X. If you break from Europe now, you'll collapse all the currencies and it gets all really messy. You're going to hunger, and that hunger will take you straight into anger. And that anger will take you straight into blame and anger and all these. And that's what they want. They want the lowest possible you. They want you to do the most destructive kind of thing where you're divided down the middle at every juncture. You've all, on both sides, got to see through this divide. It's happening on every front at the moment. It's happening on every front. We've got some big times ahead, haven't we? We've got some big passages this year. Some really, really big ones. We're close to asteroids now. We don't know when one might come through, but we're close to them now. And we have enormous protection, and the only thing that keeps that protection up for us is with the people staying at peace. They're just going to try and rock the boat, and we've just got to hold it together. See through it. See through their divide and conquer tactics. And just keep remembering to keep nurturing these feelings of well-being for each other. Keep trying to help each other. Keep trying to see through their divisions. And then if we get past this, and we get through this, and we don't go into war through this, we manage to wage peace all the way through this, humanity has the opportunity for a future. It's so fantastic. That is so fantastic. That it just blows away how fantastic it could be if we get through this subversion that humanity is experiencing now, being used as a slave race for another agenda. we're sovereign on this planet. And we have to kind of stand in our sovereignty now. We have to look at the problem, the real problem, in the face. We have to look at the naked lunch. This William Burroughs naked lunch. See what's really on the end of the fork. Start looking at all the different alternatives in clean, abundant energy. Bring it all onto the table. For all our time, all our attention into bringing those, and I will start doing that a lot more with my channel. And you guys can maybe send me as much information on Randy Mills as you know, and I'll kind of assemble it. And the next video it will be about looking at some of the clean energy systems, maybe even getting an invitation to go down and sort of like, you know, even having a little look at, you know, sacrilegious name Kesh, but I'm still curious about what Kesh has been doing. You know, I want to look at all of these different stories. I want to look at all of these kind of ideas of abundant clean energy solutions out there. Let's look at what's available now. Let's talk about that as well as just carbon zero, carbon zero, carbon zero. Take care. Ciao.